Morning, everybody. In this video, we'll talk about saving and investing your money. You know, um, I talk to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of owner operators. And a lot of drivers, a lot of company drivers. I do all my research on saving and investing, and researching other companies and trying to maximize your earning potential. And what I've concluded is that if you want to get ahead of the game someday, and escape the 9 to 5 or the rat race of going from paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, there really is only one way, in my opinion, one way to get out of this cycle. Because it seems like many times you're just spinning your wheels. You're making ends meet, but you're not really making a lot of progress. you know, how do you break that? How do you break that cycle? It's you got to invest your money. I know a lot of people don't know a lot about investing, and it can be somewhat worrisome that if you invest your money, are you going to lose your money and things like this. And what I can tell you is that investing is going to be your best friend. It's going to be what pulls you out of a lower income or a lower lifestyle to a more agreeable lifestyle that you want. It's like someday you want to have some wealth. You want to be financially secure. Probably the only way you're going to do that is if you save and invest your money. You can look at careers and you could say, well, this person makes, $75,000 per year. Another person makes $100,000 a year. Another person makes $150,000 a year. But you know what? Over the course of your career, jobs come and go. It's like you may have a great job title, great office, and then that company closes, goes out of business. You got to start all over again. It's a little bit different if you're a driver and you're in the trucking industry and you have your CDL. You have more job security. But if you're looking at who are these people that become successful, become millionaires or multimillionaires, it's the people who save their money and invest it. It's not the people who are the smartest. It's not the people who are lucky or people who have multiple degrees in college. It's the people who save their money and invest it. So you could be just an average truck driver, but if you save your money and invest it, you will be highly successful. Take another truck driver that spends their money as soon as they make it, they'll never reach success. It'll never happen. They'll never be able to enjoy the financial freedom that comes with building wealth over time. There's a saying in the investing world is that you really don't want to try to time the market. It's like, don't wait for the best time to invest. What you really want to do is have time spent in the market, which means that you got to invest, regularly, often, over long periods of time. I missed that comment. I wanted to get into trucking. Can anyone do it? Yeah, anyone can get into trucking, Curtis. I went to one of these 21-day trucking schools back in 2014, and they were pulling guys all over the country. And these guys typically didn't have a lot of money. I knew one guy who didn't have any money. He absolutely had zero money. He was at trucking school. The trucking school gave him a job working around the facility, just doing like janitorial work, and he was able to get his CDL. He had absolutely no money. He was flat broke, no money whatsoever, got his CDL. And then from there, he went on to having trucking jobs. Driving truck nowadays is kind of like driving a big car. It used to be you had to learn how to shift gears, but nowadays they're all automatic, so it's much easier. Yeah, anyone can get their CDL. I would say the successful drivers are the ones who are safe. They're just safe drivers. If you're a safe driver in your car, you're probably going to be a safe driver in a truck. And the thing I love about trucking is that it's reliable, steady work. It's like you get up in the morning, all you want to do is have a job. Some days it's like, all I want is a paycheck, that I can count on, from day to day, week to week, year to year. You can't always get that when you're working, for companies that, um, hire for production jobs or office jobs, for example, or sales jobs. But trucking, it's all up to you. If you got the work ethic, you got the willpower, you're a safe driver, you get your CDL. Oftentimes you can get your CDL for free. Like the program I went through, 21-day truck driving school. Um, I was a little bit older than a lot of the guys. A lot of guys were in their 20s, and I was in my 40s, and I was getting my CDL. And I was considered the old Navy guy. I didn't feel old, but I was considered the old Navy. I was twice as old as the other guys were, and you know, as a result, I took it very seriously, and I was one of the better students in that group. And companies were hand picking the students, the best students, to recruit. And if you were hand picked, they paid for your CDL. So I got my CDL for free, basically. So that worked out really great. Now, in hindsight, what I should have done when I first got my CDL was I should have started saving money and investing. And it would have been 10 years later of investing, and I could have benefited from all those years of being in the stock market. But I had to learn on my own how to invest. And it was hard. It's very hard. And a lot of times I would try investing and I would lose my money. And I'd be like, this is not working. What's the point of buying stocks if the stocks just, take a nosedive and you lose your money? I said, this sucks. But I will recommend a YouTube channel called Professor G. He has a 3-fund portfolio. I'll find a link. I'll put it in the description when we're done. But he recommends for beginning investors, 3 funds that you can invest in. Very stable funds, stuff that you can sleep at night knowing your money is not going to go away. He'll invest in things like the S&P 500, which on annual return historically has been 10%. So a lot of times when I talk about investing, I always refer to the S&P 500. Historically has returned 10% return on your investment. That's better than you're going to get at any bank, any savings account, any checking account, any high yield savings account. 10% return on your investment is great. So if you put $10,000 in, and on average on a year you get $1,000 earned interest. That's less work you have to do for that $1,000. So you want to save your money by controlling costs. Really look at your spending habits, try to control costs, save that money, and buy stocks, buy ETFs, buy index funds. So we talked about S&P 500. Another one is called an ETF. It's called QQQM. It's a high growth ETF, exchange traded fund, and that can get 20-30% annual returns. A little riskier, but it gets greater returns because investing in technology stocks. Another one is SCHD. It's Charles Schwab high dividend fund. It's really good. It typically gets 10% or more annually. So you look at something like Professor G's 3-fund portfolio, and you can start earning interest, compound interest on your money. You could work for your money. You could work your fingers to the bone, or you could work your whole life and really have nothing at the end of it. Or you can start saving your money and investing, and let the money work for you. So you working for the money is working for you. This is the idea that time in the market is better for you than timing the market. Some people say, well, I'm going to wait till the stock market comes down, then I'm going to buy stock. Well, that's not a good strategy. That could take years for that to happen. And in the meantime, you're not earning any money. Your money is not working for you. So the idea is you want to invest regularly. Whether it's $500 a month, maybe you could do $2,000 a month if you're an owner operator. If you're an owner operator, you probably could do $2,000 per month. That would just do wonders for you. If you invest $2,000 a month every month for 10 years, you'll be able to retire. So if you don't invest any money, you're never going to be able to retire. Warren Buffett, who's the founder of Berkshire Hathaway, said, you got to find a way to make money while you sleep. And the way you do that is you invest your money. If your money isn't working for you, then you're going to work until the very day you die. You're just going to work until the day you die. That's it. Because you'll never be able to afford not to work. So I would encourage you to learn how to invest your money. Save money and invest it. A lot of times we spend money on the dumbest things, just absolute dumbest things that you really don't need. It's like, why did you buy that expensive car? Why do you have a $2,000 cell phone? Why are you giving money away to friends and family? It's like, those are nice things to do, nice gifts and things like that. But a better thing for you would be to save your money and invest it. It's like, try to think of future you 10 years from now. Future you 10 years from now is going to be very, very happy with yourself if you've been saving and investing for 10 years. It's the miracle of compound interest. Because let's say, for example, the goal, a goal I often recommend is to save your first $100,000. They say that's the hardest money you'll ever earn in your entire life, is your first $100,000. Why is that? Well, it's because of compound interest. Once you get $100,000, compound interest really kicks in. So let's say you get the S&P 500 average 10% return on that investment. 10% of $100,000 is $10,000. You just got $10,000 you didn't have to work for. It's like, that's amazing. For me, what that would represent as an owner operator is I didn't have to work for an entire month to make that same amount of money. I would typically make $1 per mile. Typically would get 10,000 miles per month. If I got $10,000 return on my investment, that means I didn't have to drive 10,000 miles to make that same amount of money. And I look at, okay, you got the first 100,000, that's your hardest. You get 10% return on that of money, at least. You're gonna get $10,000. So the next $100,000 increment, you don't have to get $100,000. Now you only got to get $90,000. Okay, now you got $200,000. 10% of $200,000 is $20,000. That's 2 months worth of driving that I wouldn't have to do. See how this works? And now, instead of having to reach, for the next $100,000 to get to $300,000, all I got to do is save $80,000. I don't have to save $90,000. I don't have to save $100,000. I got to save $80,000. Now I get at $300,000. And so on and so on and so on. Year after year after year, each $100,000 increment becomes easier and easier to achieve. But you got to develop these habits of saving money and investing. It's at first it can be quite challenging. It's like, I don't have a lot of money. And they turn and tell me I need to save it. It's like, I don't have anything to save. But you got to look at your expenses. And it's like, do you really need $1,000 a month apartment, or can you find one for $500 a month? Can you get a roommate? Cut down your housing expenses. Do you really need a $30,000 car, or can you find a good, used, reliable vehicle for $15,000? If you don't have your CDL, get your CDL. If you're a company driver and you got some money saved, you may want to buy your own truck, and increase your savings and investing. So there's a lot of things you could do. Don't think of success as a career choice, like you got to be a scientist to be successful. You don't. You don't have to be any certain profession. There are doctors who are broke because they spend all their money. There are people who make close to minimum wage, but they're very thrifty and they know how to save money. So it doesn't matter what kind of job you have or what your job title is or what kind of college degree you have or don't have. It's your ability to save money and invest. If you can do that, you're going to be successful. Another one I'll throw out there for you is a website called Seeking Alpha. I'll put a link in the description. That's for investors who want to take on a little more risk. And what they do is they send you 2 stock picks per month. Now, this is a subscription service. It cost me like $1,000 a year to subscribe to this stock picking service. But they give you 2 stock picks a month, and you can invest in those stock picks. And they'll tell you when to hold, when to buy, and when to sell. But that's a little more risk, and it does have a subscription fee with it. But I would suggest you start with Professor G's 3-fund portfolio. That's going to be your great place to start. Let's see some of these comments. What to do for a living? Okay. What I do for a living? Well, this is a trucking channel, and I am a truck driver, so I drive truck for a living. So let's see what else. Someone said they just need to renew their license. Okay. All right. So I think I answered all the questions. So that's good. So, I'm a little bit older for most of my viewers. A lot of people that watch my channel probably in their 20s and 30s. They may be in their 40s, but if you start investing today, you'll enjoy the benefits 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It's like you'll be able to afford things that you never thought possible. It's like I never imagined a day when I didn't have to worry about money. And how do you reach that day? I would suggest you reach that day of having financial security by learning how to save money and invest it. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.